Who says crafting is a dying art? I'm finding crafters all over the Middle Tennessee area who make unique items that'll be passed down for generations to come. Welcome to HandMade Tennessee. I'm Kimberly Vance, and my special guest today is Rebecca Merritt. Hi, Rebecca.
Hi,
thank you so much for coming in today. Now, you've got a special treat for us, something that's very appropriate for this time of the year for sure, but you're going to be canning for us. Thank you so much again for coming. All right, so what are you going to show us today?
Well, I'm just going to go through the steps in the process of canning and show you some equipment that is needed and give you some tips that I've learned over the years from canning.
Wonderful. And
just show you a little bit about preserving some of your
goodies you make. Well, I'll tell you what, I know absolutely nothing about canning because I was always under the impression that it was very hard to do and that you might blow up your house if you do it. And that's actually not the case anymore, is it?
No.
Did it used to be the case when all you had was the pressure cookers and stuff?
Well, it still can. You still have to be careful and show caution when you're using a pressure canner, but it is, you know, if you watch what you're doing and just pay attention, like doing anything with heat, it can be a little bit, you know, dangerous, but just if you watch and be careful, it's not scary.
All right, good. Well, that helps me out a lot then. All right, let's see. Now, you'll go through the equipment and stuff that you need with us. What kind of apparatus is this? This is not a pressure cooker.
No, this is not a pressure cooker. This is a water bath canner. And this is the type of process that is used when you are doing jams and jellies and acidified foods, which are foods that you add acid to, such as relishes, pickles. So anytime you do jams or jellies, tomatoes, if you want to can tomatoes, you can do that safely in a water bath, and also any thing you add vinegar or acid to, relishes, salsas, pickles, can be safely preserved in a water bath canner.
I know those are a lot of the most popular preserves and items because you find for Christmas, we have gotten before several salsas and stuff that people have made, and they are so delicious. And I think, wow, they've really gone through a lot of effort and a lot of work to do that.
Yes.
How did you get interested in canning? Well,
canning is something that we did as a family. We always had large gardens and would can and preserve foods. And then, of course, my interest grew into learning more about the field of home economics, and so that's what I majored in college and got my master's in food services. So I've always been interested in food and making food, preserving food, and that type of thing. So
I'll tell you what, it is a dying art. It certainly is, and that's what we're trying to do on HandMade Tennessee is preserve some of these fine arts. All right, well, would you care to show us a little bit about it?
Certainly. There is some equipment that is essential, but there's not a lot. So it's you don't have to go into a big production, but the things that are the most essential are jars that are specifically made for canning.
All right.
Some people might use old mayonnaise jars or old, you know, jars from other things, but that's not the safest thing to use. So you need to purchase jars that are specifically made for canning, and there's several different types and sizes that are food quality safe.
Now, what is the downside to using, like, say, a mayonnaise or a pickle jar?
Well, they're not.
Seems like it wouldn't seal.
Right. It does. It won't seal as well, and also the glass is not made to keep using over and over. In this jar, you know, once you use it and use all the preserves out of it or whatever, you can wash it and save it back for the next year. So these are good for, you know, several uses.
Right.
And the jars are very important. You have to have the correct jars, and of course you can. They come in all different sizes and shapes. Depending on what you're canning and how large, you know, of a jar that you want to put them in.
Now, do you do it specifically? This seems like this would make sense. If I were going to make some jam or something, obviously I wouldn't want to use a huge quart-size jar. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so you want to use the appropriate size jar
for what you're doing.
Okay.
Yes.
Right. And now these jars are relatively easily obtainable, aren't they?
Oh yes, you can get them at any store really. A lot of even grocery stores now carry canning supplies, and of course, your hardware stores and just your general
That's
stores.
wonderful, isn't it?
Oh, yes.
We find things that we need nowadays.
And a lot of places now are carrying them all year round. You know, used to you could only get pectin and certain things you needed during the season.
That's very true.
And but now there's a few places I know that carry things all year round. So when we do have a large crop of some type of fruit, a lot of times I'll put it in the freezer and save it till winter when they've not got as much to do, and pull it out. And that's a good way to do it. So
okay, so you could, even with your frozen fruits and vegetables, you can pick them or buy them, whichever you choose, and then freeze them.
Yes.
I didn't know that.
Yes.
See, I always thought you had to use fresh stuff.
No.
Oh, well, that's neat. All right, now how do you judge how many jars you need?
Well, generally,
I guess you know, but how would someone like me who's just starting out?
generally, the best thing to do, especially if you're not an experienced canner, is to find a good standard recipe. And a standard recipe is a recipe that's been tested by scientists or home economists. Following that recipe, if you follow it carefully, then you will have a very high quality, safe product once you're done with it. And the recipe will always tell you how many pints or quarts or jelly jars or whatever it will make. So if you're making just one recipe and it will say it will yield 5 jars, then
Okay, then that's what you need. All right, good. Well, that's encouraging, because I thought, wow, do they just throw you out there and make it and hope you have enough jars?
Right. Yeah.
All right.
But the second thing that is the ultimately the most important part about canning is the lid. And most of your canning lids come in 2 pieces. The sealing piece in this can only be used one time.
Okay.
It has the seal on it, and of course I'll show you when we actually go through the process, but your 2-part lid, and then the ring, it just holds the seal in place while it's being processed.
And the ring is reusable, right?
The ring is reusable.
Okay,
The jar,
yes, laying around.
The jar and the ring is reusable.
All right.
And then the sealing cap is not.
Every time. Okay, so after you open it, then when you're finished with the product, you discard this part.
Yes.
Okay. Very good.
Of course, for my commercial canning, I use a 1-piece lid. It just looks, a little more professional or whatever. But those, you have to order these. You can get your 2-piece, which are your most common and are very easy to use. You can get, of course, where you buy your canning supplies.
See, now this looks to me, it looks like just a regular jar lid.
It is, but it has the seal in the side. That will seal. And of course, these are not reusable.
Okay.
No,
so
because
anything we seal with is not
exactly,
reusable.
yes.
Okay, very good. All right.
So actually, your jar and your lids are really the only thing you have to have. They're very, very important.
Okay.
The other things just make it a little easier. And of course, you have to have, your hot water bath if you want to preserve it properly.
Now, if you had just like a regular stock pot, is that okay?
You can do that, yes.
All right.
But these are so much easier to use, and they're not very expensive. So if you really want to do
Plan on doing it more than
yes.
once. Okay.
And of course, it has a rack in it that holds the jars, and you can dip it down into the water, so it makes it a little bit
It certainly
easier.
seems like that would make the difference.
Yeah.
Now, how many jars can you fit in there?
It depends on what size, but I can usually get about 8, 8 or 10.
And is that a good size amount? I mean, that's a lot?
Yes, yeah, that's.
So that'll go a long way.
Right, it will. It will. It's usually maybe a standard recipe full or so.
All right, great.
So.
All right. So now you've got here. Is this where you actually start after you have your equipment?
Yes. You pick your food, and of course you want to pick. Most people can because they have the produce.
Right.
And of course you want to pick it when it is at its peak, and then you can either freeze it right then to keep its quality, or you can preserve, can it. But you want to get fresh produce at its peak. If you grow it, or you can get it at the farmer's market, or from local farmers to get some things.
Did you grow these?
Yes. Oh, yes. We have blueberries, and this is some of our blueberry sauce that we make and can and use. Of course, I use it down at the inn, our bed and breakfast, on French toast and pancakes, and it's good on ice cream or
that sounds
anything.
delicious. So you could even use the preserves like that too. This is a preserve that you're going to make?
Yes, that's not really a preserve, it's a topping. There's different, as far as your fruits fruits, you have jelly, which is used from the juice, which is the clear. Then you have jam, which is the fruit mashed up with sugar and other things added to it. Then preserves are chunks of fruit that has been almost fermented. You put sugar over it and let it sit for 24 hours, and then you preserve it in a can. And then you've got sauces and syrups and you know,
I did
things.
not
So there's
know
all
that.
different types of things you can do with fruit.
Well, it's nice to know the difference between jams, jellies, and preserves. I knew there was something, the reason they had to be called
Right,
different things, but I didn't realize that's what it was. Oh, that's very interesting.
So just a few more pieces of equipment I have here. This right here is a jelly bag, and of course when you cook your fruit down, you can pour it through that, and just the juice comes to make the jelly, so you'll have a pure juice. This right here is a food meal where you can mash the fruit. I like to make apple butter and pear butter and peach butter, where you've got some of the fruit in it, and I'll do it through the food meal.
I've heard about your famous butters.
So anyway, those are just some things that are handy to have. Of course, I use a food processor sometimes, a mixer, a blender, just, you know, whatever you have in your kitchen that works for you best.
Because most of us have a blender, or even I've got one of those little choppers.
Yes,
and it seems like that might be a trick. All right, so this would be for your jellies. This would be for your jams.
Jams and fruit butters.
And fruit butters. Okay.
So anyway, the process, if you just want to go through that quickly, of course, the process of canning is to sterilize and seal food to keep them or preserve them for a long period of time.
Now, how long are we talking? For example, of what you're going to show us today, how long would
If
that
it is
keep?
properly sealed and properly prepared, it can stay for 3 years or longer.
Wow. Oh, that's a good long time.
Yes.
Do the work once, eat for a while.
Yes.
Oh, that sounds really good.
Yeah. So if it's all done properly, the shelf life is quite several years. So.
Excellent. All right.
So anyway, what you want to do, depending on what you want to make, of course, today I have some blueberry topping, some blueberry sauce topping, but what you do is you want to put your hot product into a hot jar, and then you can put it into your canner.
Okay, so you put it into a hot jar?
Yes.
Is that so it doesn't change the substance, change the texture?
Yes. Well, it just helps all in the sealing process.
Okay.
What I do when I'm canning at home is I put my jars, I could sterilize my jars, wash them, and then put them, I turn my oven on to about 200, and just keep all my jars in the oven so I can pull them out when I'm ready for them. Down at my cannery, when I can for products to sell, I have an industrial dishwasher which gets it very, very hot, and I just put them all in there, and it sanitizes them and keeps them hot for a long time while I'm doing that process.
So that's a good idea then. So we would keep them in our oven at about 200. All right.
Just so they're good and warm. And of course your lids have to, your sealing lid has to be hot too.
Okay.
And so I just put all my lids in a pan on the stove with some water and boil them, and so they're ready to put on when I'm ready for them.
So you just boil them. We don't have to worry about cooking them down or ruining them.
No, no.
Because they are made for that. Obviously.
Right.
Okay.
So another handy little piece of equipment, of course, is a funnel, and this is one specifically for canning that fits down into most of your standard size jar lids.
And I know, by and large, I think you can find these relatively inexpensive.
Oh,
I think they're like $1 in some places.
Actually, even your hot water bath canner is not real expensive. It's not really an expensive thing to get into for what you get out of.
Right.
All the products that you can make and get out of. But so once you have gotten your product to the proper stage, which might just be bringing to a boil or might be jelly stage. A thermometer is also a good tool to have while you're while you're canning, especially for jellies.
Do your items need to be a certain temperature?
Well, it depends on what your jellies do, because you want them to gel. Your preserves and jams are not as critical as, to a certain stage. That's mostly just texture, your texture prefer. This sauce just needs to thicken. It just needs to boil for a few minutes to thicken.
Now, will the recipe that we get, would it probably tell us what temperature?
Yes, it will. It should tell you what temperature.
Okay.
And of course you can use the thermometer by sticking it in there, or there's different ways. You can a lot of old cookbooks will have how to test if it's to jelly stage. You get a spoon and a cold plate and drip some on the spoon, So some older cookbooks will tell you some techniques to use if you don't have a thermometer to see if it's to that jelly stage yet.
And have you tried them all pretty much?
Oh, yes, yeah. Yeah. So, but anyway, you're going to want to put your hot product into your jar, and it's important on your recipe, it will say leave a headspace, and headspace, of course, let me get this over here, is just some room from the top of the rim down. So right, just
to where the lid would go.
Right.
Okay.
Just so it will have room to. If you get it too full, it's not going to seal properly. It's not going to make it airtight.
Okay.
This allows the air to be, sucked out, which keeps the microorganisms from growing. That's why you preserve food, is to kill or stop or hinder any microorganisms which are harmful, yeast, molds, bacterias, food poison, those types of things. So
we'd all be a lot better off if we did this nowadays, wouldn't we?
Probably. Of course, with your jams and jellies and your acidified foods, that's not as much of an issue, the health part, as your vegetables, which we can talk about vegetables in just a minute if we have time. But of course, once you fill it and leave your headspace, you're going to want to screw it on. Of course, this is all very hot, so I always use my mitts. But another handy little tool is a jar lifter. Of course, you can use tongs if you want, but these are specifically made to reach pick up your jars.
And these are relatively easy to find as well?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
All of these things you can find.
And what's that called, a jar lifter?
Jar lifter.
All right.
So you're just going to place it down in the your hot water bath, and this has to be boiling water enough that will cover the jars.
Okay.
The jars must be covered with water to be able to be sealed properly.
All right. So we would fill it on over to the top, so pretty full.
Well, this will go down. So about up to that rim is usually where a good amount of water.
And it needs to be boiling when we put it in.
It needs to be boiling when you put it in. Put the lid on, and your standard recipe will tell you how many minutes to boil it. Most of your jams and jellies are anywhere from 5 to 7 minutes, not a long time. And then I set the timer, of course, and then when the timer goes off, of course, it's going to be very hot and steamy, but I use my jar lifters to reach down there and pull this back up, and then remove your jars and then listen for the pop. That's the most exciting thing about canning.
Is that when you know it's been a success?
That's when you know it's been a success, when you hear the popping. So
I know that when I was little, my grandmother would we would kind of always stand by after, it seemed like a few days or something, so perhaps that was an older way of doing it, but we always wanted to listen for the pop.
Yes.
Oh, that is fun.
So,
all right, now what are these items that you have
well,
here?
I just brought some different things. Pectin is something that most of your jam and jelly recipes call for.
Okay.
Fruit has natural pectin in it, and so some of your recipes are not going to call for pectin, which is probably because that fruit has enough or is high in pectin. But that's what helps it gel or solidify, is the pectin. But most of your recipes are going to have you add some pectin to it, and there's lots of different options. There's a powder, there's a liquid, and of course there's different brands.
Now, what is pectin? It's just sugar?
It's the sugar that's in fruit that helps it, seal.
Okay, and which
gel.
do you prefer to use?
Well,
powder or liquid?
it depends on what recipe I'm using or what fruit I'm using.
Okay.
And I've learned just from doing different things that powder is better in some and liquid is better in some. So
now let me ask you this. I know that I have seen, it's I guess been a long time ago, and I don't even know if this is still any type of standard today, but I have seen wax. When you actually open a jar of something, it actually does have a wax topping. What is that?
that was how they used to preserve it. That's not really recommended nowadays. Yeah.
I guess it was like a paraffin.
It was, well, and it was like it took the place of, this seal.
Okay.
It helped seal.
So modern technology has come a long way.
Yes, it has. It really has.
All right. So now, what would you do with this? To me, looks like it's relatively simple. It does look like something that we could do at home. All right, now, how about vegetables? Are they more involved?
They are, simply because they're just of the danger factor for keeping them safe. And it's really important to make sure that you do vegetables properly, because even the soil that vegetables are grown in contains the microorganism botulism comes from. So you have to make sure that you sterilize them, and if it's a low acid food, which are all of your vegetables except for tomatoes, they cannot be safely processed in a water bath. You have to use a pressure canner. And a lot of times it will take, once you prepare your food and put them in the pressure canner, it takes several minutes. Like I know when I put up my potatoes, it has to be in that pressure canner at a certain pound per pound of pressure for 25 minutes.
Now, how do you know? Does your pressure cooker have a gauge or something on it?
Yes, it has a gauge, and you have to make sure that it, when you put your jars in, once you have done it, filling the jars and everything is the same thing. It's just done the same way. Heat your jars, put your hot food in, that type of stuff. But once you put it in your pressure canner, of course, you screw down the lid because there is a lot of pressure that builds up there, and that's what can be dangerous if if it's not screwed on properly. The lid could pop off or something.
I started to say I had never heard or even thought that vegetables might be dangerous. So okay, that explains that.
Yeah.
I'm not afraid of vegetables now.
but then it has a gauge on it, and it will tell you. Once it reaches the pound per pressure, in this area in Tennessee, 11 pounds per pressure is what you need to use on your canner.
Does that have to do you think, with the atmospheric pressure?
Yes, well, the altitude that you...
Where we're at. Well, isn't that something?
Yeah.
I had never thought of that.
So 11 pounds of pressure, and you have to keep it at that for the 25 minutes, 35 minutes, whatever your product calls for.
Your recipe.
Yes, and you can get some canning charts from the Extension Office or from the Department of Agriculture. The World Wide Web is a wonderful thing, but there's also a lot of things out there that are not accurate.
Okay.
So make sure when you're looking for a recipe or a canning chart that tells you how long to can certain vegetables, that you get it from a place or source
reputable.
that is tested. There's some people I've even saw not too long ago online canning green beans in a water bath canner, which is not safe at all. No.
Okay.
So
wow. So we do need to go to the Extension Office, our local Extension Office, and obtain some stuff from there.
Right. Yeah. Or get on the Department of Ag website. They have some things on canning too.
Now, you were an extension agent.
I was
for a while.
For quite a while, about 15 years.
Wow. Did you love that?
I did. I enjoyed it. It was going out and teaching and doing things like this with people.
Wow.
And,
did you learn a lot from that?
I did. I learned. Of course, everything you do in life, you learn something from. So
hopefully, right?
Yes.
That's what we're trying to do here, is learn some stuff. Now, what have you brought with us? What
These
else
are just some of the products that we have from our cannery. Of course, our cannery at the Bonnie Blue Inn is a picked Tennessee product. We grow probably about 95% of what we use in our canned products.
Oh, wow.
And on the nursery, and then we have a licensed cannery that we produce some jams and jellies and relishes and things.
So you are a professional. No doubt about that, right?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
That's muscadine syrup.
I'll bet that is delicious.
Yeah.
Well, great. Now, what do you have this dipper here for?
Well, a ladle is another piece of equipment that most kitchens have that is pretty handy when you go canning to ladle out from your pot into your jars.
Okay, that does make sense. Yeah, instead of having a big pot full.
Yeah.
That's really neat. When you think, well, everything's coming in now. Of course, I guess with your fruits and vegetables, they come in at different times. But when you have several things, I guess you're very, very busy putting stuff away.
Yes, of course it is seasonal, and it all seems to come pretty quick.
Right on time.
Right?
I'd say it does overwhelm you.
Yes.
So are you actually out there picking and?
Yes, we pick and then preserve and.
So you've got a lot of work invested. When we see this on the shelves, we know exactly what's going into
That's
this.
right.
A lot of work and a lot of love, right? That special ingredient. That's really neat. Now, your tea room, the Bonnie Blue Tea Room, tell us just a little bit about it.
Well, we are open for lunch 3 days a week, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday from 11 to 2. You don't need a reservation.
Do we get to try some of these things because you have them in your restaurant, right?
Yes.
Awesome.
And you don't need a reservation. You can just come. We have a regular menu that we serve every day, and then we have a special that changes.
Oh, that's neat. And do you actually do the cooking and stuff too? Wow.
Yes.
So you are tried and true when it comes to this. Oh, that's awesome. And you also have a bed and breakfast out there as well?
Yes. The tea room is actually in the bed and breakfast. It's an old house.
Oh, neat.
And we have several overnight guests. So that's
Oh, that's fine. I guess we would need to make a reservation for that.
Yes, to stay the night, yes.
If we show up with our suitcase, you're going to tell us when. All right. All right, but if we show up with our bibs on, you can get us right in there, right? Well, is there anything else you can think of that we might need? So if we want to can, basically the main thing that we need, of course, is some proper jars that have the proper seals, and then a lot of heat,
yes.
it sounds like. All right.
Yes.
I liked your idea also, if we don't grow anything, of going to the farmer's market.
Yes.
That's a good idea.
Yeah.
Now, do you sell any of your fruits and vegetables, or do you use them all?
We sometimes sell. My husband goes to the flea market, and we have a nursery, so he takes trees and shrubs there. And if we have a lot of extra produce, he will take some there too.
What all do y'all grow?
We have strawberries and a few raspberries, blueberries, blackberries, muscadines, figs, pears, peaches, apples, cherries. I think that's most of our fruit. And of course, then we have vegetables, a lot of tomatoes and corn and beans. Of course, I don't can the vegetables, low acid foods, to sell them. You have to.
Because it's such a process?
It is a very big process to be regulated to do that, but we are regulated to sell the relishes and pickles and jams and jellies.
That's interesting. Oh, that is really neat. I'll tell you what, I have learned so much today, and I am pretty sure that I'm going to go home and get my stuff and get me some things to start canning.
Well, good.
You have made it sound so easy and so wonderful.
It is. It really is.
Well, thank you very, very much for coming
Thank you. I appreciate you having me.
Thank you, and I sure have enjoyed having you here today.
Thank you.
Well, that's our show for today. Thanks very much to our special guest, Rebecca Merritt. I'm Kimberly Vance, and I hope you've been inspired to create your own handmade Tennessee. If you enjoyed today's show, check us out on Facebook for other shows and information at www.facebook.com/HandmadeTennessee. You can also email us your comments or suggestions to handmadetn@bltv.net.